Hey friends, welcome back. Let's talk about what feels like a very clear turning point for Janelle Brown, because it really looks like she's shutting the door on Kody Brown, and on the cameras too. If there was ever any doubt that this might be her final season, I'm about 99.9999% sure she's done. Janelle recently posted on Instagram saying she's kicked the cameras out of her life. That's a pretty strong statement. And on top of that, this week, she went to the church leaders to officially ask for a release from Kody. When the episode opened, Janelle was with Meri Brown in North Carolina. Meri didn't exactly sound thrilled about her mom re-entering anything connected to polygamy. In fact, she flat out called the situation toxic. And honestly, it's hard to argue with that. Having to sit in front of a group of men and ask permission to leave your husband? That alone feels unhealthy. Meri even asked a question most of us were thinking. What happens if they don't release you? What will you do then? Janelle said it would cause a crisis of faith. And that's where things start to feel a little strange. Because if you really think about it, nothing about their current lives lines up with the church anymore. They drink alcohol. They don't wear garments. They swear. They live very public lives. They openly talk about polygamy and expose things that were once considered private or even sacred. They watch what they want, listen to what they want, and they don't tithe. In every practical way, they've stepped completely outside that world. And yet, when it comes time to end the marriage, they still feel pulled back to the church for permission. That lingering hold, especially on Janelle, feels powerful and hard to shake, even now. She did go back. She did ask. And for the record, she was granted the release. What's interesting is how Kody handled this in the episode. He suggested that if he didn't go ask for a release himself, it was because the leaders supposedly told him he couldn't have one anyway. That story has shifted more than once, and it doesn't quite line up. Janelle said she told him she was going to ask. His response? Indifference. He brushed it off, saying something like, well, they'll probably tell you that you can't marry outside the faith. And her reaction was refreshingly blunt. Fine. She doesn't know what that even means anymore. And she doesn't care. If she ever marries again, it'll be on her terms. Meanwhile, Kody claims he's being called a coward for not going to the leaders himself. His explanation? He says he did, and that they told him no, that he couldn't even ask. So here we are again, with shifting stories, blurred accountability, and Janelle quietly but firmly moving forward. You know, what really stands out to me here is how strange Kody's logic sounds when you slow it all down. Apparently, he tells Janelle that if she gets a release, the church is going to tell her she can't marry outside the faith. And I have to ask, why would that even matter to him unless, deep down, he still believes he's eternally married to her? That's what makes this so confusing. On the surface, Kody Brown keeps saying he's not a polygamist anymore, but emotionally and maybe spiritually, he still seems stuck in that mindset. It's like, in this life he's moved on, but in his imagination, or his afterlife, he still sees himself sealed to all these women forever. You see this with a lot of men in that belief system. They talk about having multiple wives, but they don't really live polygamy day to day. They're not showing up. They're not nurturing those relationships. Instead, they're clinging to the idea because they believe it earns them a higher place in heaven. So again, why would Kody even care if Janelle remarries unless he's still holding on to that eternal claim? Then there's the issue of what he says he knew. When he was first asked if Janelle had talked to him about getting a release, he said no. He claimed he didn't remember, that it wasn't something he was paying attention to. And honestly, I don't buy that for a second. If one of your wives comes to you and says, I'm going to ask the church for a release, you're absolutely going to track that. Especially someone like Kody. He'd be furious. And not just because of the marriage, but because of the humiliation. This would mean going back to former church leaders, people who once respected him, and essentially being told, "We're releasing your wife because you abandoned her." That's not something he'd forget. Janelle made it very clear what her grounds were. She said he told her he wanted to live with Robyn Brown, that he's in love with Robyn, that he's estranged from her children, estranged from her, and that she wants out. In this culture, there are only a few reasons that qualify for a release. Things like abandonment, addiction, or adultery. Janelle went with abandonment. And that matters because abandonment doesn't just end the marriage. It labels him as someone who failed to take care of his wife. It puts another crack in the image he spent years protecting. More embarrassment, more egg on his face. What makes it even messier is that now Kody is suddenly claiming that he asked for a release too. This is after years of insisting that men don't ask for releases and that it's not even a thing. So now we're supposed to believe that he went back to the church and asked to be released from his wives? If that's true, what does that say? It means he was willing to walk away from them completely. And when did this happen, exactly? Because this is a brand new version of the story. It's not one we've heard before. At this point, we know the release process is happening, even though this episode doesn't give us the final word from the church. And there's another odd detail. Janelle is shown walking around what looks like Salt Lake City, but the church offices aren't anywhere near where she's filmed. It all just adds to that uneasy feeling that we're not getting the full truth, at least not from everyone. So let's clear up one detail right away, because it matters. The church offices aren't in downtown Salt Lake City at all. They're actually in Bluffdale. So that B-roll we see of Janelle walking around the city, that's not her heading into the church. It's just visual filler. The real meeting happened elsewhere. And yes, she did meet with the church leaders, and she did receive the release. And it really does feel like she's done, not just with the marriage, but with the show itself. That becomes even clearer when you read what Janelle Brown posted on Instagram. She wrote about how strange it is when people feel like they already know you, because they've seen you on TV. A version of your life, sure, but not the whole thing. Not the private thoughts, not the quiet heartbreaks, not the parts you don't even fully understand yourself yet. She said that once the cameras went away, she realized how much of her identity had been shaped by what people thought they knew about her. And rebuilding after that? That takes time. She talked about asking herself some big questions. Who am I when all of that is stripped away? Who am I when nobody's watching? She described the rebuilding process as messy but beautiful. Something she's still in the middle of. Still learning. Still uncovering parts of herself she didn't have space to explore before. And if you've ever felt misunderstood or reduced to one version of yourself, she said, you'd understand. There's a whole world inside you that deserves to be known. Not just seen, but known. In another post, she reflected on how her story had been woven into something bigger for so long, and how people only ever saw her through that lens. She said she doesn't regret it, but it didn't leave much room to figure out who she was outside of it. This chapter, she explained, feels like the first time she's had space to ask what she wants, what kind of life she wants to build, who she is when she's not introduced as part of something else. It feels strange, a little exciting, and very grounding, like she's meeting herself again. Now, here's the thing. I said it back when they all started leaving. None of them were going to be truly free of Kody, or able to fully process what they went through, as long as they were still doing the show and still branded as the sister wives for TLC. As long as they were filming, they were stuck in the rat race, storylines, production schedules, deadlines, budgets, deliverables, showing up, performing, keeping the machine running. And that's why it feels a little odd hearing Janelle talk about all of this as if it happened so long ago. The show may not be filming at the moment, but it's still on the air. People are still seeing her almost exclusively through Sister Wives. The cameras being gone is a very recent thing, maybe a month or two, 3 at most. Now, maybe those few months really have been life-changing. Maybe stepping away gave her the mental space to finally breathe and think clearly. That's absolutely possible. But I'll admit, when she says she forgot who she was, I pause a little. She was in her 40s when the show started back in 2010. She's about 55 now. By 40, most of us have at least a decent sense of who we are. I'm 47. I know who I am. So, I don't know. Maybe it's not that she forgot herself completely. Maybe it's that she's finally meeting the version of herself that never got airtime. I know myself. I know what I'm about. And that's where I pause a little with this idea that Janelle didn't know who she was. She may have been lost in a cult. She may have been lost in polygamy. But she didn't suddenly become a blank slate. She knew herself. Now, if what she really means is that she doesn't know who she is without fame, or that fame changed her, or that she hasn't had time to process everything that's happened to her, then I completely understand that. That makes sense. Because, let's be honest, almost none of us have lived what Janelle Brown has lived. How do you process the collapse of a decades-long marriage while it's being filmed for network television? How do you grieve the death of a child when that grief exists alongside contracts, cameras, ratings, and public commentary? I can't even wrap my head around that. I truly can't imagine my divorce becoming episodic content or my deepest heartbreaks turning into ratings, ad dollars, and income. So yes, I do have empathy for her in that sense. She's stepping out of something incredibly messy, and I genuinely hope she heals. I hope she gets clarity. I hope she understands how she got there. At the same time, I'll be honest, there are moments when it's hard for me to feel full sympathy. They knew what they were doing. They made choices. And as long as the money was coming in, it was acceptable. That doesn't mean they deserved what happened to them, but it does complicate the picture. Still, I'm glad she's removing herself now. And it's never too late to learn more about yourself. She's 55. Her brain is fully developed. If she takes care of her health, she could easily have 30 or even 40 more years ahead of her. That's a lot of life left. What's sad is not that she's discovering herself now. It's that the lifestyle and the show caused so much damage that this kind of rediscovery is even necessary. It's sad that at 40, she didn't have the freedom to live fully as herself. It's sad that it took this much loss and upheaval to get here. But one thing is crystal clear. She's done. The cameras are gone. She's done with the show. She couldn't be clearer if she tried. What's interesting, though, is that when I looked at Christine Brown's account, she's actually just launched a new website, and she's openly said she's still filming Sister Wives. So I don't think the show itself is canceled. I think Janelle may simply be stepping away. And I know Christine gets a lot of criticism for staying on the show and continuing to talk about polygamy, but I have to say this. I'm proud of her for how she's using her time on screen. This season, her storyline is very clear. She's unpacking what she lived through. She's naming the lies. She's pulling back the curtain on what polygamy actually looks like, not the sanitized version they sold for years. Before she left, and especially right before she walked away, she started telling the truth. When she talked about being the basement wife, that wasn't just a catchy phrase. It was a crack in the fade. For years, the messier parts of polygamy were hidden. The emotional neglect, the trauma, the imbalance, all of it was ignored. Instead, they wrapped it up in a neat bow and tried to convince viewers that this lifestyle was healthy and functional. Christine is finally saying, it wasn't. And that matters. What I'm seeing with Kody Brown this season is something very different. And honestly, very telling. She's sitting with her husband, David Woolley, having real conversations about what she lived through. She's unpacking what was normal, what absolutely wasn't, and how different her life looks now. And here's the thing. Sometimes you don't even realize how messed up a situation was until you're standing in something healthy. You just don't. It's only when you have a stable, respectful relationship that you can look back and say, oh, that wasn't okay. That's how I see Christine's storyline. She finally has a framework, a real marriage to compare her past against. And that contrast is powerful. Now, Janelle Brown's storyline isn't quite there yet. And if she's truly done, if she doesn't want to go down that road on camera or unpack all of that publicly, that's her choice. I respect that. Healing doesn't have to look the same for everyone. That said, I do respect how Christine and Meri Brown, too, are really naming the trauma of polygamy. I hope that at some point in Janelle's healing, she's able to acknowledge that this wasn't a perfect lifestyle. She doesn't need to live in regret. But I do think it's okay to say, I made mistakes, or things went off track, or even, I was led astray. That doesn't mean you regret your children. It doesn't erase the good moments. But it does acknowledge the harm that happened. When you leave a cult-like environment, one of the hardest things to do is admit you were wrong. It's incredibly hard to admit you were fooled. And maybe hardest of all, it's painful to confront the idea that your children were exposed to harm because of choices you made. I've spoken to women who've left similar situations, and many of them say the deepest pain isn't just what they endured, it's what they brought their children into. The lack of stability, the chaos, the things they wish they had protected their kids from. They were surviving their own trauma and abuse, and in the process, their children were exposed to it too. That guilt can be overwhelming. So many of these women spend years, decades even, having hard conversations with their kids, apologizing, trying to make peace with what happened. That kind of reckoning is heavy. And it's ongoing. What we do know for sure is this. Janelle has kicked Kody Brown and the cameras out of her life for good. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you found this helpful, please give the video a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed and click the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, bestie!